Wonderful people, we are live this time also on YouTube and also inside the Zoom. So we have a backstage and we have the YouTube version. So please, if you're on YouTube or anywhere you are, just go and hit subscribe on our new wonderful page and like to this video and share it through LinkedIn and everywhere you can. We are very open to receive all your comments because this is an interactive play for us. We always love to have the feedback from our audience and our community who loves Tech Leadership Lab and what we are doing. And Christina Imre, the founder, and I cannot stop or start doing talking about anything else. Before the summit, we have an awesome summit less than 3 weeks away, and you can find our link also on the YouTube channel and also here inside the Zoom where we are here in backstage. Please attend, please send press register and also share it with anyone who is interested in our future, creating an amazing future for the future generations, solving the climate SDG as soon as possible, and then all the other SDGs. Our first summit is the intersection of climate, AI, and humanity, an important trio that we decided and aligned on inside Tech Leadership Lab, that these are very important. No matter what SDG from the 70 SDG sustainable goals from the UN you want to solve, you do need to solve climate first for a wonderful future where we still have a lot of time and we have the solutions to put them together and unite us to the grid. And with that said, today we have one of my favorite topics when it comes to climate, when it comes to our future, because it connects us directly to nature. And I want you to know that since I started to educate myself and become a climate expert for our summit and to be eligible to talk important aspects and topics with our amazing expert speakers, I fall in love in biomimicry. This happened around a couple of months ago when I started to dig more. I had a little bit of knowledge, but not so much. And I know that my first love affair started with the termites when I discovered that they are one of the oldest architects of our world and that they have so solid resistant structures to weather and they have that natural ventilation system and that they are farmers. They are mushroom farmers and they do everything perfectly. And I said, oh my God, they have 300,000 years ahead of us. And we need to pressure this because every species that is here longer than us brings us tons of questions. And so I was in a desire to have this meeting today and have an episode on biomimicry when I saw Andrew Hawley, who also has a background from Natural Geographic. So I think he has now over 15 years of experience with nature, going into nature, understanding animals, writing about them, writing and reading about studies. I said, wow, what a wonderful speaker would be. And we had an amazing session, like two kids, literally, because I was so excited to tell him what I've read about this. And he obviously from the expert position acknowledged that and gave me a lot of extra wisdom. And today we have with us Andrew Hawley, who is the chief editor of Ask Nature, but also Biomimicry Institute. And we are very happy to dig in what you're doing and your experience. And first of all, welcome to Tech Leadership Lab weekly meeting podcast through Zoom today as well and YouTube.
Thanks so much, Christina. It's really great to be here. And it's been wonderful to see the outline that you've laid up for these podcasts and for the upcoming summit. And just hearing your perspective and what you're bringing to this effort has been fantastic. It's really inspiring to get to meet you and talk to you and see what you guys are up to. So really happy to bring biomimicry to the forward position in this conversation today.
And because we are in a family vibe, and I also have a co-host, I don't want to just neglect, but I asked Carlos, this is one of my favorite topics. Let me jump in. Carlos, if I forget something at the beginning, some household things, please just add them up.
Yeah, just your basic house kind of guide. Remember, we will have kind of a Q&A portion to the conversation towards the end of the conversation. We're going to let Christina geek out on biomimicry first with Andrew and let them just have that conversation. At the end of the show, we will be able to have some questions from those that are in the Zoom meeting. If you have questions and you're watching on YouTube, we are watching the YouTube channel as well to answer questions that might come in through there. And then if everything goes well, this should be an amazing conversation. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing Christina geek out with Andrew. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Andrew, you started this adventure for a long time. I would love you to just wrap us through it when your love for nature and then biomimicry came on, because stories are very important and you do have some
Sure.
interesting to share. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as a kid, I think as everybody, you're out playing and you have lots of experiences just seeing the world around you in whatever environment you're in the city or in the country. You find bits of nature and observe them, whether it's, large wild animals or just the squirrels and birds in your backyard, sticks and twigs, and just exploring all of that was always so much fun. I always enjoyed watching nature programs as a kid. And, grew up, had my education. I majored in anthropology and archaeology, which is, really studying people and how we work with each other and the world around us. And it gave a great big picture perspective on things. And I was working in the early days of the internet, working on content and kind of deciding how I wanted to weave everything together. And I saw Jane Goodall speak, and she was just amazing. Had always heard her name, knew about her more specifically from doing anthropology work, and studying primatology and that. And seeing her passion and dedication at that point, it had been, maybe like 40 some years that she had been studying these the chimps in the wild, and just the passion that she brought, the dedication that she realized that she's, jet setting around the world, constantly meeting as many people as possible, spreading this passion and energy. And it really struck me. I was like, wow. And that's, for these animals that she loves, but it seems to be so much bigger and deeper than that. And then at the same time, there was Steve Irwin was on TV, the crocodile hunter. And I know people, people had different feelings about the way that he did things, but I think what was inarguable was his passion and excitement and love for these creatures. And he did have a very natural way of interacting with them. And I think he was, free of some of the boundaries that we put up between we're humans and share other species. And you just saw that he related to every living thing on a personal basis, as though he knew them and really addressed them individually, and could read so much about them and their experiences. And those two people, very different styles, but when you hear Jane Goodall begin to hoot like a chimpanzee in a big auditorium, you realize how connected we all are like that. And this deep passion kind of reawoke for me that kind of latent passion that I had for nature and animals. And I decided that I wanted to use kind of the different skills that I had developed to somehow relate more to other species and to understand them and to bring knowledge and appreciation of them to people. And so I started looking around, found a great job doing internet stuff like I was doing, but at National Geographic. And that led to one adventure after another. And then eventually to the Biomimicry Institute, where, kind of captures all of that diverse awareness of nature at every level and connects it so much to the human experience and the human activity in the world. So it really pulls everything together for me. I really love it. And it's a real treat to get to have this as my job, to just go down rabbit holes and geek out all day, every day.
This is very interesting because, everyone who loves nature and the species and us as humanity collectively who works in this fields are saying that they cannot believe that they have this for a job. And so because their experience is especially because you were on the ground. And I would love to hear a couple of examples about what you discovered with those scientists who were there to do their job and you to document them. And what were those initial aha moments about, wow, how could we translate nature into something sustainable for our future?
A really formative experience that I had was when I was at National Geographic. I got to hike for a week with Mike Fay, who's a great environmentalist and ornithologist and naturalist and activist, and you name it. He's the man that, walked across Africa and kind of petitioned the government of Gabon to set aside large swaths of their country as preserved, protected areas because of the realization of what great biodiversity was preserved in the hinterland of their country that was really, it was at risk, as we see so much of the world's natural areas becoming cultivated by human activity. And so this was years later, and I got to walk with him across Saguaro National Park in Arizona in the US. And so it's a national park on either side of the city of Tucson, Arizona. And so we walked from the eastern side up over the mountains, down through the washes, things, through the back roads of the city, and kind of saw that transition from the national park to a major metropolitan city, and then back into the national park on the other side. And while we went, we were met with local naturalists, park rangers, herpetologists, you name it, teachers, all kinds of people, and got to see through their eyes. And with Mike as the constant guide, this guy who's really just dedicated to this idea of transecting. You just walk as straight as you can and notice everything you can in the natural world and how it's interacting. And then having the specialists come in. So, a day where we would cover, 10 miles, and then a day where you'd cover hundreds of yards because you're walking with a grass expert, and literally every blade of grass is interesting and different to them. And seeing that level of awareness of nature and how it all interacts, being able to weave that through so many disciplines, through so many individuals, and through so many different ecosystems, from the untouched nature to a highly touched nature of a city, which is still nature. It's the same bugs, it's the same pollen, it's the same birds throughout this whole ecosystem. It's a really wonderful way to get to see that woven nature and to realize that all that we're doing as humans is just participating in the rest of the natural world. That's all that there is. There's not an unnatural world. There's a nurtured world that we could say, but lots of other species, like you were talking about termites nurture the world in very different ways and leave long-lasting concreted structures that have ecological impacts of their own. And so that realization that we're here and part of all of this, whether we like it or not, or aware of it or not, we're all tied into it. And so to realize how much better of a partner we can be with all of these species if we put our hearts and minds to it was just really inspiring, kind of set me along this path.
That's my realization too, that it gives me hope. We have solutions and we can solve everything if we want to, and we are united. This is what we need to do, to unite and act, because things are not doomed. There are solutions, and quick solutions. For example, based on what you said, I just learned about the importance and how impactful mini forests can be inside the city. And mini forests can be just like, I don't know, 100 square meters. I'm talking European sizes. And where, if you combine the species, the right type of trees. And so there are experts who are going around the world and just creating this mini trees, mini forests. And if you know how to combine the right type of species and put them together and just water them for 2 years, because 2 years they need a little bit of help, after which they take over, they will grow fast and they will bring rain. And for me, this is magic. If you know that now taking care of and placing forest in your space, you can bring back rain that we know in many places, it's just like missing for years. Why not just do that today, right? So how do you see this adoption, mass adoption from what you saw?
Yeah, I think, biomimicry as a whole is looking to the way that nature functions, being inspired by it and adapting those methods to the innovation and processes that humans create ourselves. One of the best tools that we have to do that smoothly is to kind of let nature do what it is doing. And so you see like the rewilding movement, where it's like, if we want to transform a landscape, if you want to bring back the mangrove forest, well, you don't just go out and plant a couple of mangrove trees, because that's not how a mangrove forest grows. You have to let the wild spread of seeds and interaction of multiple species grow in succession of plants to recreate the growth the way that it naturally grows. You just let it be. And so seeing that nature is in biomimicry, we often say it's our model, our mentor, and our measure for or it can be, should be, for the way that humans act. And it's also our partner in this. When we bring nature into the process, we can just let it be, just give it the space. And so you see that a lot through, like I said, rewilding or preservation of naturally balanced ecosystems often become these refuges that are then just incredibly fertile and prosperous. And their prosperity, tumbles out beyond their borders. And, they become islands of safe haven for birds and butterflies and migrating species, or in the sea, a marine protected area just literally just spills out over its borders in the sea, and it's just replenishing. And when we just give nature space to do what it does it very robustly and very prosperously. And so that, even when we see that, that's a lesson in itself, and another model and inspiration for us of how the human role in an ecosystem doesn't have to just, it doesn't have to be detrimental, as we've grown and seen a lot of human activity become. And we've got a pretty good momentum on people no longer wanting it to be detrimental and trying to say, well, how can we be doing no harm? That's good, right? But the real next step is to really be biomimetic, to be functioning like our other fellow species, is how we can be beneficial to everyone else, all of the other species around us. And the more pockets of robust nature that we see, like these mini forests, or like grand preserves, or like any robust, balanced ecosystem, it's an inspiration to us to begin to function that way. Like a tree is growing, it's doing what it does as a tree. It's growing its seeds to grow more trees. Yeah, well, those seeds are encased fruit, and that's feeding how many other species, and it's controlling the uptake of water and the release of water, which is affecting the precipitation at the forest level. So, a single tree is not just doing what a tree does and everything that's happening around it. It's an integral part of its ecosystem. And we're just kind of not paying attention to a lot of it and being kind of bad partners in a lot of our activity. If we can be good partners, we can really be part of the story of biodiversity and prosperity and health and resilience in ecosystems wherever humans are.
You just recalled me to something we had internally many times with, we have Laila Hecker here, our amazing Chief Information Officer, and she was like super excited to connect with us because through COVID, she made us to put the videos on our YouTube channel as well. We have there a section where we include important YouTube videos. You can just see and educate yourself about what's happening in climate and the impact and what you can learn from there. And I know that I just put Because of Lila video there about what happened during COVID. We forget it's just happened 1-2 years ago that animals started to come into the cities. The air became blue again. You could see the sky in places. The pollution was so high you just couldn't before. And what you're saying, let nature do its thing and just take out yourself from the way. Sometimes it just helps. The same with the trees, right? And so I would love to see Carlos, because I'm sure you have something to add here from what we discussed. I'm looking forward to your feedback.
Well, no, and actually, Andrew, I really liked how you were able to connect the urban kind of nature concept to nature as a whole, because I know we live in civilizations, right? And the idea of cities and urban environments, even suburbia and so forth. But it's all, if you start thinking of it as another nature model, and you start to think about how you can associate traditional nature to I forget what you called it, maybe manufactured nature. I don't know what you called it. But if you can start to connect the two dots and say, okay, well, if we are a nature model and we can implement some of nature, I mean, it sounds, that really starts to kind of change, not just from a very practical perspective, because I mean, I know I've seen biomimicry used in like fabrics and other things to kind of create more of a tech kind of model from nature, but also kind of expanding it to a macro level and trying to identify those kind of scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the most famous and earliest examples of biomimicry are very concrete, kind of mechanistic descriptions, which are great and huge, and important, and have made a lot of great progress in ways. But you can look at those and say there's ways that we can be mimicking nature and just kind of doing something kind of like it in its shape or design, right? But not necessarily in its most fundamentally relevant way, which is integrated with other species, right? It's kind of always promoting this community of development, right? And so we can take any innovations, any kind of approaches that we're taking and use them for good or ill, in better or worse harmony with the rest of the species around us, right? And that's, I think, one of the big lessons is to then learn to take stock of, well, what are the species around us? What are the species that could be around us? What can we be doing to make this, bring this into a good balance? And it's not that it has to be the removal of cities entirely, right? That it can be fine, but having good integration of more natural landscapes within a city creates those islands that allows other organisms to, be continuing their populations and their impact in the ecosystem, and allows the water table to be, flowing the proper way and being balanced, and allowing, the cleanness of air, like kind of we were talking about, these things that say, if we can embrace not only, metaphorically and philosophically that humans are integrated with nature, but say that within our landscapes as well, we see a lot of benefits from that. I think that is, those kind of integrated mixed landscapes are really going to be a big part of it, a part of a really regenerative future for humanity. So at the urban level, right? But then even within agriculture, we're saying, well, we've been doing kind of a monocrop agriculture at a large scale in a certain way, and that's had certain benefits and it has had certain costs, right? There's other forms that maybe integrate more species, like agroforestry, where they're kind of growing species that can be cultivated underneath the canopy of a forest, or with different tiers of species going on. And then that's creating a more robust ecosystem. So maybe your yield isn't quite the same as if you had a monocrop for that year, but maybe it's more sustainable in the long run. Or maybe it gives you better resilience year to year, or maybe you actually value the presence of these other species because you realize that that's what's keeping, a healthy ecosystem really writ large, including, having free flowing water and the preservation of the water cycle and everything. So I can keep going back to water, but water is life, as we say.
Yeah, I'm constantly surprised about how a little change that you can make with nature, like bringing wolves that will redirect waters or bring back water, or just creating a forest, putting a forest in the middle of a city, and that region will start to have rain in 2 years. I mean, these things are absolutely amazing, and it can teach us. Everyone should have this in school from the beginning, because it's not just like we need to do this, but it's exciting because if we can live with nature like our ancestors and the chief of tribes are doing today, we could have such a beautiful, again, green, luscious nature type of living that we can all enjoy, and the kids can have, again, oxygen and trees to just climb and play with. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would love to see if Laila, she would love to interact with us. And I see your hand for YouTube. For the YouTube version, you cannot see, but Laila is here in the backstage. So let's see if we can see her. Laila, please go ahead.
Mm. that we've ever seen. Yeah.
At the best, what cities or a place have impressed you with the type of ways that they combine nature and society?
Yeah, okay, that's great. One thing that comes to mind is that London has recently, over the last several years, named itself a national park city, celebrating the fact that there is a lot of green space in this sprawling, like world-class capital city. And it's always been there. They didn't tear down blocks of buildings to put in all of these new parks. It just became a shift in perspective to say, let's realize this, that there's so much green space that's not these little pockets of trees that are in between a couple of buildings. Those little pockets of trees add up to being a kind of consistent canopy over vast areas of an urban area. So that's a great example of it kind of being realized, and then that shifting the focus, and then people will engage with it and kind of help protect it and think about it differently. And then that helps make different decisions as you then start planning future developments, because that's the way that it has been, but that doesn't have to be the way that it goes. Somebody could just start looking at London and saying, there's all of this wasted space where there's nothing but trees. Let's develop it, right? Bangalore is another interesting one where in centuries ago, it was really built around like kind of water retention ponds, and had a really integrated landscape. Also like Angkor Wat, going further back. These are, like massive cities in development that were really integrated with their landscape, but also with cultivation and agriculture. But they were done in a way that kind of allowed all of these things to be happening at the same time, like human settlement and development, industrial control of resources like reservoirs, but also enough naturally occurring green space to kind of keep an intact ecosystem that way. And then you have cities that are being very innovative and forward thinking, like, in Singapore, they try anything. They'll come up with something that seems inspiring and like it has potential, and they'll go ahead and do it. They'll implement it. And a lot of times it seems like it would be impossible, but then you see somebody make a decision to do it, and lo and behold, they're able to do it. I think that the air quality example from COVID is a good example of that. I think we would generally think that the impact that humans have on air quality is just permanent, and it's just the way it is. And who could even imagine how long it would take for the air to clear over Los Angeles, right? And then the answer was a couple of days. A couple of days of not driving all of those cars. Yeah, it was like, so you realize, like, yes, there's incredible barriers, incredible things to figure out logistically, and about the equity of who's benefiting and how everything happens. But you see that things can happen, and a lot of things are already here for us to take advantage of, either on the ground now or in our history, like in Bangalore. And you can see different examples like that, and just realize that there's a lot going on. Things are pretty plastic, it seems so permanent. Our world seems so permanent to us so many times. But it can all be changed. Like you can see it, through, renovation, where they can tear down one office building and put up a new office building in the same place, in a matter of months. You're like, well, you can also tear them down and build something very different. Like that can also be done. So I find that all really very, very inspiring.
This was a very good question, Laila, and we will take question just in a little bit, and this will be done by Carlos. Before that, I would love to dig in a little bit inside what you're doing at the Institute, because I know you have multiple projects inside the Biomimicry Institute.
Mhm.
And I would love to touch base a little bit the connection and what you're aiming to do with the AI moving further. And then we will also talk about a couple of startups that you find interesting together with your colleagues that are innovating inside the biomimicry area. And this is super exciting. So let's start with AI. I know that you are also fascinated and passionate about the new direction you are taking. Tell us about what you're doing at the Institute and what are the new directions.
Okay, so looking at AI, we've like anything else, it's a tool that humans have developed, and it can be used well or it can be used poorly, right? So it's clearly a powerful tool, so we want to use it well, right? And so we've tried to think, can this help us do what we're doing? One of the fundamental things that we do at Ask Nature specifically, so within the Biomimicry Institute, we produce Ask Nature, this website, this resource where you can come to learn easily about the methods and practices of various species and how they do what they do. It's all tagged and classified by function, saying like, not just what is it doing literally, but what is the ultimate function of that? And then you can look for each function and see how different species are accomplishing these same things, such as, protecting yourself against infection, right? Or gathering resources or moving across a certain medium, right? These are things that lots of different species have developed lots of different techniques for addressing, different mechanisms and different approaches. And so on Ask Nature, we put that all together in this shared language, which is made more accessible than the kind of deep scientific jargon that you'd get in scientific papers if you just tried to go straight to them. Sometimes it could be exactly what you're looking for, and it would be really hard to know that it is because of the jargon and things. So to make biological information accessible to anyone trying to learn from nature, we've translated it into this kind of jargon-free language that's contextualized with the life history of the organisms and made relevant to human challenges. A lot of that, ultimately, we've done this like 2,000 times. There's like 2,000 pages on the site, and we've done this a lot. That's a lot of data, right? And so while you couldn't just turn to AI and say, tell me about anything and make it relevant, that's like kind of nuanced, and where is it coming up with this information? You can kind of step it through well. So we've used it as a tool to help our editors move through more content more quickly by helping it to translate the scientific jargon into our kind of language. So whereas an editor could spend hours and hours on a single piece, now they can kind of get a head start by having that simplified and be able to contextualize it there. And as the system is learning more about the ways that we do things, it's becoming smarter itself and kind of can start to learn how to suggest applications that could be relevant or find the relevant aspects of a new bit of research, So we've kind of used it there as a tool to help us move through more information quickly, because with 2,000 pages, that sounds like a big website, but that is a drop in the bucket of what nature is doing and what we could know about it and what we already know about it. And that kind of frees us up for other things. So if we've got a pretty good AI system for handling what's in a published biological research paper, well, now our editors can also focus on other ways of gathering information about the natural world, because there are a lot of other ways that nature has been learned and a lot of other ways that it's recorded beyond just a published scientific paper. So traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, there's so much understanding about about the natural world that humans have gathered and passed down in various ways for a long time. Like, our understanding of nature didn't start with scientific notation and scientific description, right? It's so rich. And what are the ways that we can kind of bring those stories where relevant and appropriate for sharing, allow communities to share that with the rest of the world, with the rest of people trying to understand how ecosystems work. And so it's opening, it's kind of freeing us up to focus on some of these other relationships and ways of learning and ways of knowing to help share and make that more part of what we're able to make accessible to people to learn from nature and apply that learning to put us and our activities into better harmony with it.
Say it, Carlos.
I
I see
am.
that you want to say something.
I can't help it. I am so geeking out on the AI conversation, and I love that you brought the idea of the type of artifacts you could bring to a large language model, right? You know, it doesn't have to be just the research paper. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is the idea of videos, pictures, information that is maybe written in languages that not many people know about anymore, right? Because a lot of our history, you know, and especially in indigenous cultures and so forth, is passed through story, and it's passed from, you know, in verbal history, right? And so being able to capture that information, but then being able to put all of the different variables and all of the, I mean, imagine if you could record every leader, every family, and then do a consensus of that in terms of the knowledge that's learned from the different groups or the different tribes and the different villages, and bringing it all together because they all have different perspectives. So I think that it's great. And I always talk about with AI, you could go for efficiency, but that doesn't guarantee effectiveness because you still need the human element to bring in the effectiveness, right? And so when you start being able to say, we're not just going to focus on being able to process 2,000 papers, we're going to also start thinking about the human and some of the other ways that we can gather the information and process it. That I think is a great case for AI.
And you made me
Yeah,
think
thanks.
now about the parts that you are saying about, yeah, the indigenous people who had everything transmitted through stories and pictures in the caves. And just imagine how many they were not depicted yet, and they were not translated well or understood well. And now, once we put all the information we can gather as humanity together collectively in an LLM, a large language model, and then we can put the images as well. Hey, what did they say to us? What was not discovered yet? What are the patterns? I mean, oh my God, this just opens up an entire universe of knowledge.
Well, yeah. It also, though, there's an important thing to realize there, where sometimes the process of the AI and the connections that it's drawing are very linguistic and very yeah, they're very linguistic, and they're very almost utilitarian in the way that that data is analyzed, and that can actually lose a lot of the coding. So it provides certain levels of information and access to information and ability to process it, and you can do it at incredible scales and speeds. And so we can maybe think of like how could we do that to stories and extract from there? But then, but stories aren't like a technology waiting for AI to be able to help us access them. They're a completely different way with of transmitting things and encoding layers that, you know, AI may never be able to touch because there's so much baked in. So, you know, a lot of one of the biggest, one of the most important things to preserve knowledge is preserving language. So in a lot of, you know, traditional communities and indigenous communities all around the world, they have distinct languages, more or often less related to any other languages around them. And those languages encode interpretation in words and terms that aren't maybe directly translatable from language to language. And so the very structure of language, the words that it has, can bring color and interpretation to what they're discussing. And then the way that those get strung together into stories and into knowledge and ways of telling can have other layers. And it's stuff that is kind of a different order than the very fact-based statistical analysis structure of more hard-coded descriptive scientific information that's more easy to process and appropriate to process with machine learning. So I see it more as like these are two incredible technologies that humans have developed, right? These ways of writing down facts and compiling them and analyzing them in ways that reveal things that we've never known. And also ways of speaking very richly about things through language, metaphor, and story that really the only way that all of the information gets conveyed is when it is part of a living tradition, passed on through not just the words of the story, but the culture of the story, the practices that go along with it, the ecological knowledge and awareness and context. And so I think in seeing their differences is one of the things that's helping to increase people's awareness and appreciation of the differences and the value of both of these ways of knowing and conveying information. So when we think of them together, we think of it more of like, okay, so AI can help us take care of all of the scientific data. That's really easy for AI. And now we can get in and be working with people and stories and getting some of the stuff that is kind of ineffable and harder to tell, and opening up, another branch of knowledge and another way of knowing and describing that that is just as rich and just as advanced and nuanced and developed.
This just opens up a rabbit hole we can dig in for another for an entire show. I mean, I just got at least 10 ideas while listening to you. I have one more question before we take amazing questions from the YouTube channel and here from Adela as well. And but before that, because we have a summit in March and the intersection of climate, AI, and humanity, please subscribe and register to our summit because it will be absolutely awesome. And one of our panel is also about impactful tech. So we are looking forward to connect the dots in our world, bring technologies together that can solve the SDGs, starting with the climate SDG. And I know that you at your institute are also researching and searching for specific startups that can innovate and bring a lot of good in this world. Just a couple of maybe insights from what your colleagues discovered, you discovered, which are the startups that today are innovating from biomimicry and that could be huge?
It's very exciting because there's so many ways that it's going on. A couple that have been sticking out in my mind lately because they have kind of different approaches, but like one is Green Pod Labs, and they say that one of the big problems is food waste. So one of our biggest impacts on the environment is the loss of natural ecosystems to human development. Some of the biggest forms of human development that we have is agriculture. So the more food we waste, the more food we have to grow, essentially, right? If we're not making good use of the food that we're already growing, we're just having to clear more land. And that has a big impact on biodiversity, ecosystem services, et cetera. So Green Pod Labs has been looking at ways to preserve food better, but more naturally, because we all know that we can put lots of preservatives in food, but they're bad for us, they're bad for other animals, they're bad for plants, they're bad for ecosystems as a whole, when these preservatives are out in such large quantities everywhere. Nature itself preserves things all the time, right? And one of the first, inventions of preservation for food is like the peel of a skin of a fruit, right? And the way that these, plants and fruits and things protect themselves. And so that comes through all of these chemical signals, not, still chemicals, but not harsh chemicals that disrupt the functioning of life, but just natural ones. So Green Pod Labs analyzes fruits and vegetables and sees what are the kind of chemical signals that a plant gives to itself, to its fruit, to say, hey, stay fresh, keep growing. And what is the disruption of those signals that then says, yeah, you've fallen off, it's time to decompose and release your seed and just start growing.
This is awesome.
Putting these, just little sachets, just little packets containing those chemical signals into the crates of food, specific for each, it's like tomatoes and avocados and different ones that they've been working with, mangoes. It can just extend the shelf life of these plants naturally and for weeks, like significant amounts. So now food is not getting wasted because it's going bad in between the farm and the table. It's still being able to be distributed far from its source of origin, which has its good and bad sides as well, right? But for that food, more of it that gets shipped stays fresh and healthy and provides people. And then that's supporting human communities. And it's also increasing the efficiency of agriculture considerably just by maintaining what those chemical signals that the plants usually give.
So I think other SDGs as well, including health, because if you start to
Right.
eat healthy in this world again, then just imagine the billions or trillions of dollars that you will save just by doing this. Awesome. Anything else?
Yeah, another one that's, a very different direction from this. So Metavoxel is a company that is using the engineering inspired by the kind of micro engineering and nano engineering that goes on in nature. So, you think, well, I'm standing up strong because I have good, strong bones. Okay, well, you have good, strong bones not because it's a solid just piece of bone, that the structure of bone itself is very carefully designed to be supporting where it needs to be supporting, to be lightweighting, to be all of these things, right? And it's not just bone that grows that way. This is across organisms, across biological forms. You see all of this careful stitching together of a substance at a nano level that then gets stuck together at a micro level, and that gets stuck together at a macro level. And that produces something far more, with material properties different than a solid block of that original material would itself. So Metavoxel has taken that principle and developed a few pieces of like 2D geometry that can then fit together to make 3D cubes, which can then fit together to make big structures using far less material, getting far better performance in a couple of different directions, like either the malleability or the resistance, the strength, the toughness, all of these things that can be maximized using less material through this built up architecture by making a simple shape that then gets put together almost like like a building toy. Yeah, which is also then very fundamental. You're like, well, scaffolding has always been used in ways, and this is kind of like condensing that and expanding it.
And the honeycomb model from bees and so forth to create more resilience and structures.
Or the protein structure database that we have today. People don't realize how huge this is because we as humans, we are protein secretory organisms. We are proteins. If once you can understand how you can influence the protein secretion and generation, you can basically go inside the longevity field. You can get healthy again, you can get fit again, you can get young again, because this is like the alphabet or the formula, the mathematical formula that now you can rescribe in a way that you just want to. So yeah, awesome. Is there any other interesting new startup to
There are very many. So our innovation team hosts the Ray of Hope Prize every year, and we get hundreds of submissions and usually pick about 10 finalists. And we've been doing this for several years, so there's at least 40 that I could go on very quickly right now. But I'll say that. But if you look up the Ray of Hope Prize, and you'll see each cohort of finalists every year, the ultimate winners, and there's a new round of that coming up, and it's a fantastic program that not only identifies these startups, but gives them all kinds of tools to help develop their story, develop their technology, relate better to their model organism, and develop some of the kind of entrepreneurial skills that they need, which a lot of times they're not getting. Maybe they started as biologists who realized that they were witnessing something interesting that could be applied, and good luck turning that into a company, because there's people that spend their whole lives learning how to start a company and it's still hard for them. So we're trying to support them with all of the different tools that they need and really building this community of support around getting all of those different pieces of the puzzle present and cultivating and making sure that when there is a good idea, it's able to go the whole way. There's too many examples of good ideas that don't make it because of, like business issues, right? Terrible things that should not have stopped technologies from being implemented.
Okay, and so to address also Adela's question, we can find this portfolio companies and the top 10 at least on Ray of Hope Prize. This is a website or something where because we could share this in the chat as well. It's something people are interested in.
Yeah, I think Layla's already looking it up.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
Daniel beat it to it.
Awesome. Put it on YouTube as well. Thank you, Danielle. Now we can go to the
Yeah.
questions. Yeah, Carlos, we
Great.
have some. Ah, okay.
Yeah,
All
and
right, we
they're
did
all
have
linked. You can find info on all of them on our site.
we have a ton of questions and we're running out of time, so we'll get to as many as we can.
We might go
Well,
overboard 10 minutes, but not more, just people to know in a way that we can organize ourselves best.
right. And so Adela
Adela
had a
or
question.
Adele, I don't know. I hope we didn't spoil.
Adela. So I don't know if Adela, if you want to ask your question, or we can read the question you posted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So go.
Question. And biomimicry, I was having this conversation about, okay, so do we actually get inspired by nature and then we try to find like a solution to something like, okay, this is very interesting, what we could, commercialize with this solution? Or do we actually, I guess we have the two approaches. So do we have this problem and then we go outside in nature and we look for inspiration that is going to help us find some solutions? The only thing is, because I was discussing with someone to create a venture studio on biomimicry, and we were like, but nature is so huge. Where do we look? Like, who is going to look at it? How long do we need to find that little insight that is going to unblock completely everything? So I just wanted to have your point of view on that. Do you use more a pull or a push approach? And if yes, I mean, what kind of detailed process do you follow? Do you work with the scientists at the beginning? I mean, design thinkers. How do you approach this? Thank you.
Sure, that's a great question, and it's definitely a both and approach, right? Biomimicry is a tool that can be used a lot of different ways by a lot of different people, and that's one of the beauties, is that once you start looking this way, you can find the way that is most relevant to the work that you are doing. So if you are a biologist researching the ways that things work, learn about biomimicry and be aware of the possible relevance that something that you witness might have, and then either find a way to explore that more yourself, or get connected to people who will explore it more to try to find a biomimetic application for this, a way that can be applied, because that's what you're already doing, right? But if you are a designer and you're out there looking to solve your problems, well then, or solve a design challenge, then you're going to be looking and saying, well, okay, let me find something from nature that might be relevant to this. For the Biomimicry Institute, we've kind of built Ask Nature as a tool to help the latter more. People who are trying to solve a particular design challenge and want to look to nature to do it. So Ask Nature has both biological strategies that they can find examples from nature, or it also has existing innovations, so they could find an existing innovation that might be relevant. But we work with lots of people. So a lot of the Ray of Hope Prize participants are people that started out as biologists. They made some discovery and then said, wow, this has relevance and I'm excited about this, and I feel like this is where I should go next. So it's really about spreading the idea as widely as possible, because it's applicable in so many ways, and trying to support people whichever direction they're going with it.
So you're more of the idea that kind of, if you start thinking from that perspective, if you add that lens to how you process and think, you'll start to see it everywhere, kind of thing, right? Like
Absolutely.
If you buy a car, then you see it everywhere, right?
Yes. Yeah. We think, one of the benefits of Ask Nature is it's nice to look at. Like we've made an effort to get really beautiful photos and to use good, rich storytelling to make it pleasant. So just as you go through it, it's compelling and satisfying to look at, even if it's not relevant to you. But while you're doing that, you're building this backlog of information in your head, and you're training your eyes and your mind to be seeing things this way, so that then the next time you're addressing a challenge, you're like, well, I guess really what this is doing is it's all about, maintaining, like gathering a resource. It's a, it's this kind of resource. It's not a direct comparison, but that actually, well, when I saw that thing about ants and the way that they get their resources because they send different people out and then they come and that this is how they track each other. Oh, that's an idea. It's all about training your mind. So yes.
Yeah, thank you. This is we have some great questions here. I learned a lot, and it just brings me to the question before I address that. What do you think is the biggest resistance we have today to just utilize what we know from nature? What did you notice from the field?
I think inertia, where people just think, yeah, but that would change. Our supply chain is already built up this way. We already have this. It just seems too disruptive or something. But it doesn't have to be disruptive. It doesn't have to be all at once. Every incremental change that we make makes the next changes easier. So it's a long game that we're in. There's a lot of short-term pressures to improve the way that we're working with nature. But if we really just get lots of little things going in the right way, that starts to add up fast and it starts to facilitate bigger changes later. So I think that's one of the biggest hurdles is to find the ways that you can do it. If that's too hard, we'll find the one that does work and do that one. And then the next one is going to be easier.
Because I had a discussion very recently, and it's important because it comes from an innovator who has an amazing solution for the world in architecture and construction. And he was telling me that, my biggest hurdle is from engineers, that they don't want to change their ways to construct things. And so what can we do with a mindset that doesn't want to change, not just because they are afraid of what might happen, but they don't even want to hear the new innovation?
Yeah, I think part of it is trying to change those hearts and minds and get them exposed. And I think part of that can come through the storytelling. Like we're, big believers that when you really learn about the organism and what it's doing and how that developed and what it's going, it's really astounding and inspiring to see. And that kind of gives you a little bit of the confidence and energy that you need to maybe go a little bit more boldly. So I think a lot of times it's that. It's like get connected to it, really reconnect to that specific example and reconnect to nature as a whole. And you'll find that, you're up for it more than maybe you thought you were before.
Storytelling.
The other side is preparing the soil, right? So getting the students, like people who are learning engineering now, get them exposed to the idea that there are other ideas out there. There are new possibilities, new technologies that are maybe not quite usable yet, but it's in the back of their mind as something that might be coming down the road. And
future
getting
jobs.
them to, future jobs and being out of the mindset that we had been, which was everything is going the way that it's going, and that's just the way that it goes. That's not really a good attitude in any human endeavor, really, right? You always want to be adaptive. But responsive and cultivating that will help.
We have a
there's
great
so much
question
to dig into that.
Let's take questions.
There's several questions from YouTube. We have one very curious YouTuber. Thank you. So one of the questions was about Chernobyl and, how much have you been able to kind of dig into what happened with Chernobyl and the impact it's had in terms of nature adapting to high radiation environments and the inhabiting land, and kind of what lessons you might have learned from that.
Yeah, I know it generally, not with great detail, but what my takeaway from it was that it's a great story of the interdependence of organisms at multiple scales. So we talk about it a lot now in terms of like health and fitness about your microbiome and are you gluten sensitive and what does that have to do about the microbes that are in your gut? That's a lot of the piece of this is that a wolf itself can't process radiation better than another wolf generally, but maybe it's part of the whole ecosystem. So like there's microbes that are breaking things down or that are breaking down the elements or fixing them or scuttling them away, moving them through and that it is really about the interaction of organisms at all those levels, because even within a whole organism, you are your whole self, your organs, you're the cells within your organs, and then you're the organelles within the cells, and you're the chemicals within, you're the molecules within those organelles. And so now you're just chemicals, and that's just chemicals, and that can kind of interact, and maybe you can handle things in certain ways. And that's kind of what we see there, where we think about it as insurmountable at one level, but then it's able to be addressed by life at another level.
Break it down to its basic units. So
Yeah.
before we get to another YouTube question, I know Layla's had her hand up waiting, so we'll take one quick question from Layla, and then we'll go back to some YouTube questions until we have to close.
Because we are animals within nature, right? We underestimate what we bring to the table with our skill sets, etc., right? We overestimate how little damage, like how much damage we do, you know what I mean? Like we say, not overestimate, we underestimate how much damage we can do. But just like there's nothing in nature that stays stagnant, there's nothing in nature, like literally anything, any leaf, any tree, any twig, anything that we look at, if we looked at it in detail, we see is astounding in its beauty, astounding in its complexity and arrangement. If we could get students to see that and remember that, because we all knew that as children, right? If we could get them to remember that coming up, and using, for instance, your Ask Nature platform and that information that you have there, and how biomimicry helps and how we can apply it to other things. Maybe we should start having students create projects based on biomimicry principles, so that they start understanding that this is a part of who you are, right? And all you have to do is employ it, and we can all get great new things out of it, because we are utilizing our essentially God-given, nature-given talents.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the Youth Design Challenge, is our particular project that works on that. So we have our Ask Nature, is a big part. The Ray of Hope Prize is a big part of the Biomimicry Institute, and the youth education work that we do is a big part. And the Youth Design Challenge is a big part of our youth education outreach. And that does exactly that. It says if you're doing, basically all of the benefits of a science fair project added into, or, given in the context of biomimicry. And it is incredible to see what the kids come up with. And one of the biggest takeaways that we find is that they get over the terrible situation of climate anxiety, where kids have been, rightfully learning about the terrible impacts that we've had on the planet, and rightfully learning that their choices and response and decisions and actions have an impact, and they can do great things to impact that. Yes, that's all good. And it's also really, really burdened them with, like, there's a huge problem and we've all messed it up. It's basically on your shoulders. So good luck. And we're leaving out of that equation, there's tools that you can use to do this well. And actually, a lot of the answers are out there. We just have to listen to them and do them. And so we find that with young audiences and users in particular, that's something that they say is like, I feel so much better now. I feel like there's a way that we can address this. Feels like that there's things that I can do, because too much of it has been left of like, yeah, this is a really big problem. I hope somebody figures that out. And kids, you've got a lot of potential. Good luck. What a burden.
Nature has a plan for that. Even if we as humans don't know it, it's all in nature, the different plans that we can use.
Yeah. And so I know we're over time already. And actually some of the other YouTube questions we kind of addressed too. We talked, questions came in about STEM and how to kind of encourage people to get more involved in STEM. And we talked about some of those examples. We talked about kind of like motivating, how to motivate the population to kind of engage, and some of the storytelling elements and so forth. So I think we answered some of the questions of our YouTube audience. If we haven't, just add them and we'll try to get back. But since we are running out of time, Andrew, where can people find you? What do you have going on that you want people to know about? Tell us kind of some last things.
Come to asknature.org and use it. Ask it questions that you have. for any kind of challenges that you're facing, and also just browse it. Just look at it. Follow us on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and you can see little bits of wisdom and learning from nature every day. And just expose yourself to it. Look at nature and learn from it. Don't just learn about it. See what's going on, how things are working. And every bit that you learn starts to train your brain and your heart to learn how to see those things and make those decisions. It's all about, like, there's nothing other than individuals ultimately, and it's the things that we do add up, right? And the decisions that we make for ourselves and for groups that we're in charge of or a part of, every place that we can inject this sense of working in harmony with other living creatures and learning from them how to do this well, every decision that we can make, every way that we can influence the things that humans are doing individually and as groups can help us get us to that better balance and that more regenerative future. So yes, come to us at asknature.org and enjoy it and connect with nature.
I am going to spend time. It's like a wiki dive. I feel like I'm just going to dive in and come out 3 hours later.
Yeah.
I told you this was our meeting as well. You can just dig and find so exciting things. So happy that we had you here, Andrew. This won't be the last time for sure. We will collaborate from now on based on your research and the startups and everything you will discover. We will have you back on our show. And this was absolutely enlightening. I believe this is the future. I believe that if we allow it, together with the AI, we can spread the right information and reconnect with nature the right way, in a sense that we can solve the SDGs sooner, starting with climate. And before we wrap up, and thank you again for being with us today, for everyone out there on YouTube or here, I hope you enjoyed today's session. It was truly exciting for geeks like us, especially Carlos, Laila, and our entire Tech Leadership Lab here. And please come and enjoy our summit, because it will be revealing the intersection of climate, AI, and humanity is all about finding the right ways today, what's urgent, what needs to be done first, clarifying the road, finding the 1, 2, 3 things that we need to do, and then put that kind of pressure in front of the policymakers and decision makers around the globe. Do it and keep them accountable, because it's time and we can do it. And so this summit will be all about this, discovering, finding ways, creating a consensus document. So please come and join our summit, register, send all of the good people around the world who care about our future, and subscribe to our channels. We are first on LinkedIn and then on YouTube. And now we also have Instagram and Facebook that they are coming a little bit late. But just keep connected with us, because we are getting back every week with new topics, new interesting people, and culminating with our summit in March, between March 19 and 21. And so with that said, people, this was a delight. Thank you everyone for being here today. And I will salute you until the next time.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, really, really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.